Say hello, believers, believers, everybody else, even the Pharisees. Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. My name's Tanya, and we are here to discuss Leaving Hillsong. This is part 2 of a 1-star review with our special guest Luke. Today we're going to do a little bit of looking back pretty closely, and it's kind of like Sound of Music, like, how do you solve a problem like Mesiti, raindrops on roses, whiskers on kiddos, that kind of thing. Oh man, the jokes are getting bad. But if you like bad jokes and talking about, toxic international systems, please make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and take away the number you first thought of. When it comes to Leaving Hillsong, thank you everybody so much who contributed to Patreon and PayPal this week. It's the hardest thing because it's like it's a community where nobody wants a shout out. In fact, they want the complete opposite. So just a huge thank you to everybody. And let's dive into part 2 of a 1-star review because it's fun.
I mean, when we were talking before, we agreed we were going to drop some names, and by drop I mean like throw them over the balcony. You mentioned a traveling evangelist that was a particular influence on your life. That he's very prominent, but he's not really attached. Do you want to start with someone who had that profound effect on your life?
Yeah. Look, before there was Marty Sampson, there was Christine Kane, and before there was Christine Kane, there was Pat bloody Mesiti. My God, let me tell you, this man was a gifted communicator. Yeah, this man was a gifted communicator. This man could make you believe everything he said.
Yes,
and as a traveling evangelist, that's absolutely what he was. Funny, he was charismatic, he was. Yeah, he had everything. He was short. He had a funny voice to him. He made jokes about his heritage, being Italian. He was just everything you want to be.
Yes.
It was.
I loved him.
It was so infectious listening to him. Like, I didn't care what he was saying. I just wanted to be in the room when he was saying it. That's definitely something you want in an evangelist. But I also think that was probably some of the weakness that Pat's message had, is that I don't necessarily know that people were converting because they believed in God after listening to him. I think they were converting because they were just in the moment. And, oh my God, this guy is so amazing. And I just tried to throw my hand up and crazy. But at one point, I think from memory, I was actually at CLC at Liverpool. I think it could have actually been elsewhere. Pat actually came to our church to preach.
Okay.
And one of the things that I really thought was interesting was this idea of prophecy and prophesying over people and speaking God's words into people's life. Now, obviously, now we know that that's just another tool of the manipulation, the tool chest that they use. It's like a dominatrix in their tool chest. Well, this was Pat's tool chest. He got up one day and all these people are down at the altar call, and I can't remember what the altar call was for, but I have a very vivid memory. And this is probably what set me on my path to end up at Hillsong College. Pat pointed to me directly in the crowd and said to me, "Young man, be prepared to dream big dreams and to see God bring them to life." This guy, who I had sat on the grass at Parramatta Stadium, the hallowed turf of Brian Houston's football team.
Amen.
Hallelujah. And this man who entertained tens of thousands of people just looked me dead in the eye and told me that God has a plan for me. It was the first time in my life that I'd heard that. My God, I was ready to conquer the world. I now look at Pat and I look at the things that he says and the things that he's done, and it breaks my heart. And sometimes I'm one of those internet trawlers that gets stuck down rabbit holes very quickly. And I've gotten stuck down some of Mr. Mesiti's rabbit holes and come away from them feeling so depressed because I believed this. I believed what this man told me.
Yeah, we all
did. It changed the decisions that I made with my life.
How so? Why? What happened? What did you do?
I went to Bible college.
Why?
I went to Bible college, and Well, no. Look, you're right. I can't blame Pat. My dad also wanted me to go to Bible college, so instead of sending me to chef school, he sent me to Bible college.
Were your parents pleased with that prophecy?
Oh yeah. Oof. Woo.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
See?
Made everybody happy. Even Grandpappy, who lived in a little apartment, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna be big."
All right.
You know, like we're all doing a two-step shuffle.
He had an enormous and profound effect on tens of thousands of people, and
I would go so far as to suggest millions.
There you go, Pat. Yet, you know, it's sort of this traveling gypsy kind of figure that you can't kind of hold accountable to anything. I guess for me, like, I loved Pat. I thought Pat was exactly like you're saying, like absolutely captivating. And Brian was so boring. And yet, here we are.
And Christine Kane was so boring too.
Well,
when Pat handed Youth Alive over to Christine Kane, she was energetic.
Okay, yes.
And that's all she had for her, as far as I was concerned. It's not to say that she didn't have some interesting things to say, but I just wasn't as engaged with her because she didn't have that entertainment factor. Pat was an entertainer. Pat is an entertainer. And he's a mighty good entertainer. Even to this day, I am entertained by the absolute tripe that he vomits out of his baseball.
Yeah.
I find it really disheartening and really disappointing to hear what he says, but it's still entertaining. Like, hello, you're in cahoots with Monica Schmidt, brother. No one's going to take you seriously.
Well, you know, I mean, Pat is such an inspiration in that he has kept on going for 40 years and he just takes blow after blow.
I guess that's proof of God's forgiveness, right?
Well, Pat has a kind of a history that we won't go into, but Google will help people. But it's, you know, it's all out there. We
don't want to get sued.
We don't want to get sued today. We're bored of lawyers. But he has also doubled up as a get rich kind of advisor, prosperity advisor, and a preacher on weekends.
Yeah, and look, my dad was all about that. Robert Kiyosaki book, Brian's You Need More Money, you know, all that. Like it was, you know, like God's going to make us rich.
Yeah.
I never saw God heal anyone. I never saw God make anyone rich.
Did you go to healing meetings?
I went to Benny Hinn meetings at Hillsong, for goodness sake, and I still never saw God heal anyone.
So you start going to Hillsong. What's that like? Do you just start going on your own because your parents aren't talking to you?
Look, so some of my memory is quite muddled here. So there is some timeline issues in some timeline gaps. Yeah, there is a reason for that. I have purposefully suppressed a lot of this.
Yeah.
You know, this is stuff that, like, I don't remember most of my childhood because I don't want to. Opening that book, that's like, I burnt that book. That book doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I came into existence at the age of 21. I was a fully formed adult, and everything else is just someone else's vivid imagination. So I'll preface the explanation of how I got to Hillsong with that.
Okay.
At some point around my 21 years, I had come out of high school. I was fresh out of high school, 18, starting to do the whole Bible college thing. Applied for Hillsong, you know, started going to their conferences. We'd heard more about Hillsong, you know, obviously through Youth Alive, because Youth Alive was a Pentecostal movement that was supposedly interdenominational. So that's how I heard about Hillsong Church. And in my brain, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a church that is exactly like this Youth Alive concert. I have to go there. Yeah. So after the Liverpool CLC thing all went down, I started going to Hillsong Church. I'm 40 now, so probably like early 2000s. In fact, I was at Hillsong Bible College and I was sitting at my friend's house at 1:30 in the morning or thereabouts, early in the morning, when his mother called and said, "Are you watching the news? They just blew up the Twin Towers."
Okay.
I remember exactly where I was in that moment because I was sitting at his house, and the next morning we went to the library at the Hills campus, and everyone was just gathered around these TVs watching this whole thing unfold. So yeah, around the 2001 mark was when I was at Hillsong.
Do you just go on your own one day? Is that how it starts? I mean,
essentially, yeah. You know, it came out of wanting to do Bible college, and at this point, Liverpool CLC hadn't actually started their own Bible college, and there was a period there where I was going to Hillsong Bible College while still attending CLC. That's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that's actually something that I need to bring up. There were dual influences here that were battling against each other.
How?
Well, because Liverpool did have a very Hillsong thing going on, and Hillsong was very much a, yay, we're the world leader in everything, yay. So the friction that it was almost electric. You could feel the friction between the two churches. And very rarely would you see someone go from CLC to Hillsong or from Hillsong to CLC, because just like, I don't think, I could be wrong, but in my time at Liverpool, I don't think anyone aside from Pat Mesiti ever came to preach at Liverpool from Hillsong.
Okay. Interesting.
We had your Wayne Alcorns, and we had your Daddy Googs, and your Russell Evans, and all those guys. We had all those guys rock up, but never anyone from Hillsong.
And yet John McMartin was on the state exec.
It does make me wonder whether or not the reason why we had no one from Hillsong is because Johnny Mac knew what happened and didn't agree with it. I would not be surprised if that's the reason why that friction was so palpable.
Because that's about the same time, you're saying, anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. I was sitting in the church just much like you. I was in the same building when Brian got up and told everybody about that. I remember listening to him talk about it and thinking to myself, oh, this poor man, this poor Pastor Brian, oh my God. And it never, ever crossed my mind, because he's standing on the pulpit, never crossed my mind. That's where his accountability ended.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's part of the reason why we talk about who founded what, and you'll see so much out there, conjecture and statements about who founded what, because it's territorial and they don't want to be sued. So if they founded Hillsong and Frank didn't, that's where their accountability ends as well. Okay, I mean, it's interesting. I've actually had people say to me, were you there on the day of the announcement? Because some people walked away with a completely different interpretation of what happened.
That's called the Mandela effect. My memory, and again, bearing in mind, we're going back to periods of my memory that I have made conscious and considered efforts to suppress. Yeah. So my memory of that conversation that Brian had, and I remember he actually packaged it as, I need to have a conversation with you, church. As though we were sitting down for a one-on-one coffee at the Gloria Jean's down in Norwest Business Park, yeah?
Yeah, very personal. Yep.
My memory of that conversation that he had with the church, a very intimate memory, was that there was no naming of the actual sin, but it was very much implied.
Okay. I mean, mine is, it was a serious moral failure. And the only reason I had known that it was something to do with child abuse was because I had still some remnants of connections to people on the inside. But
so the interesting thought that I have about those people who swear black and blue that Brian mentioned the sin is that I believe that those people already knew. Because if you remember correctly, if you remember back then, Frank had disappeared for about a month before Brian got up and made the announcement.
I wasn't around then. You tell me.
There was already rumors. People were already talking. And there was the slight suggestion.
Yeah.
So I actually think that the people who are walking around going, no, he definitely told everyone what it was, they probably heard that because they knew what he was talking about.
So you're serious about the Mandela effect? I mean, as far as I know, it was the Berenstain Bears, and I'll put a link up to that. What was Bible college like? What's it like in there?
It was the beginning of my dreams, it was the beginning of my destiny, it was an opportunity for me to get all of the things that, like Bible college to me was a fix, like bearing in mind at this point, when I've gone to Bible college, I am seriously questioning my sexuality. I have already at this point done things with guys, and I'm hating myself already at this point, at this point, I just want some redemption. Bible college offered me that. Bible college was my opportunity. And I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. I remember meeting a couple who had come over for Bible college from South Africa. Lovely couple, really enjoyed their company. There was this, South Africa must be saved.
Okay.
We were all going to go to South Africa. We were going to save South Africa. I was thinking about this last night, how delusional I was to think that I could save South Africa.
Well,
because God told me I could.
Well, I mean, we all had this living example in front of us of Brian, who had come from almost nowhere with no skills qualifications.
But did we though? Because what did he say? What country did he say?
I mean, he was just going to
You
go
know?
everywhere. And I'm particularly upset about South Africa. And I'm very wondering what's going on there, if the Doolies have left it. And yeah, please please leave South Africa alone. Their pitch is family to South Africans who've had, 2 generations of people who've just died of HIV and grandmothers raising babies, and family is it's just sick.
It's one of the issues that I actually have, right? If you really want to save South Africa, then instead of getting up and talking about how gays are the devil, go put some money towards HIV research and actually save South Africa.
The image of an African man wearing a Hillsong T-shirt that says, happy to serve or something, is just devastating.
While he probably lives in a derelict house or a tent down the road, because
serving the white man.
The sad reality of it is, like, South Africa doesn't need God. South Africa needs some common sense
and some medicine and stuff. You're right. Okay, so how was Bible college after that? Then what happens?
So I started attending one of Hillsong's satellite churches, Minchinbury, under the tutelage of Mr. Darren Kitto.
Oh, Mr. Darren Kitto.
Yeah. So Darren and his wife had their 2 little girls. They would have been toddlers at this point. They had this cute little church that was starting to kind of gain a little bit of traction, probably about 100, 150 people. And I met a lovely girl there who I thought was going to be my future wife. And, like all ideas of being gay were just out the window. Like, nah, I've found my lady. I've found my calling. We're going to run the children's ministry together. We're going to start preaching together. This is our life. And Darren decided that he didn't like me and my girlfriend being together. And after I proposed to her and she said yes, a couple of days later, Darren and my girlfriend's mother had a conversation. Darren broke us up.
Wow.
Darren moved me over to Craig Woods' church down the road at St. Mary's. So because you got to understand. You got to understand every single life decision. If you're in leadership at Hillsong Church, has to be approved and signed off by your superior.
How long have you guys been together before you proposed?
About 3 years, I think.
Wow. And they just zoom in and say no and separate. What did she say? What did she do?
Well, she was a good little Christian girl. It was one of the things that I liked about her. She was kind of a little bit country, although she wasn't country. It was one of the things I liked about her. She was just such a sweet girl, and I really enjoyed her company. And, we had so much in common. But she was also extremely obedient. The reason why her mother didn't like me was because I was the person who held her hand and encouraged her and walked with her while she went to her mother and told her mother that her father was sexually assaulting her.
Was her father a good Christian man?
Her father was horrific, but he was supposedly a good Christian man. And see, this is the thing, like the mother and father did their divorce thing and, they separated. I actually think somewhere down the track they got back together again, which I think is the most disgusting thing that you could do. Your husband just raped your daughter and you're going to get back with him. Okay, cool.
See, and this is why I get frustrated that the media hears about, inappropriate. These are the kind of life situations that can just tear people apart.
That Darren Kitto was Brian's left-hand man, yeah? Like, Sunday nights, we wouldn't have church at Minchinbury. We'd go to Hills. Darren and Dion were the 2 big heavies that were like Brian's left and right-hand security guard, big man, wandering in through the crowds, keeping everyone away from him, because that's exactly how Jesus was, yeah? Jesus had security guards that kept people away from him, yeah? I was really fascinated to hear that one of the people who resigned in disgust at the latest Hillsong board meeting resigned from the board was Darren Kitto, because I'm like, oh my God.
He resigned a few months ago. How do you know it was in disgust?
Well, I can only assume. That is an assumption, of course.
Do we know how that all worked? If he was removed or...
I have no idea if he was removed, but I know that he might, from what I read, I know that he resigned, or at least I believe he resigned at the same time that Ben resigned, which I think happened quite recently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the last few months. So then after that, you start going to a different church. You're not allowed to go to church under the man who just broke up your engagement. Huh?
Well, it was really interesting because, like, I remember there was a point where Darren was taken out of Minchinbury, and I think he was brought back into the fold at Hills,
Okay.
which is interesting because it's almost like he was sent to Minchinbury as punishment, and now that you've done your time, you can come back home.
He sent you to a church down the road, didn't he?
Which was another Hillsong church at St Mary's, run by Craig Woods, and Craig ended up taking over Minchinbury and St Mary's, and I believe merging them at one point. I know for a while there he was literally preaching at one, jumping in the car, driving up the road, preaching at the other. I will say, Craig Woods was an absolute legend.
Okay.
Craig Woods was one of the first, like, you know, when you go all the way back in my history, like we'll talk about Berea Christian College and the Christian Life Centre in Minto at another time. But you go back to Adrian Reedike, who ran that joint. For all those who know who Adrian Reedike is, we're going to go there. And then you go, you know, again, like I said, wasn't really at Mount Annan for long enough to build any real connection. And you go Tepper, youth pastor at Liverpool CLC. Then you go Alice, the children's pastor at CLC. And you go Darren, you know, the pastor at Minchinbury. It wasn't until I got to Craig that I found someone who genuinely wanted to look out for me and who was there to support me and help me through some tough times. Mentored me, and he met me for coffee, and, you know, like that thing that everyone wants to have with Brian, where you get to go down to Gloria Jeans and have coffee with him. I had that with Craig.
It sounds like you were looking for something. What were you searching for in this place? Like,
why am I here? Why am I here? What am I doing here? If God has put me on this earth, what the hell for? And if God has put me on the earth, why did he make me the way? And this is the thing, you know, like every now and then I'll have conversations with Christians who like to tell me that gay people are an abomination, or, you know, like for a period of time there, my mother used to say to me, she doesn't anymore because I cut her off for 10 years, used to say to me when I was on the phone to her, I love you, even though you're going to hell.
Oh my God.
And I flipped my shit at her. I flipped. And I said, listen here, lady, say it again. Say it again and see what happens.
And?
So, well, she said it again and she didn't hear from me for years.
Okay. I'm so sorry to hear that. And that's, see, it just tears families apart.
Fast forward a little bit, yeah. Like my family are not really involved in any church anymore. My family still consider themselves to be Christians, but can I tell you, there's something in the Bible about, you know, the measure of a good family man being their kids and how their kids grew up and what their kids turn out like. Then if that's gospel, if that's how you measure a man, then my dad is a deeply flawed person. He has a gay son, he has a drug addict daughter, and he's got another son, another daughter who just do not give an absolute flying rat's a about any of this religious crap.
So all four of you have not?
All four of us. I'll tell you the moment. Now, bearing in mind at this point, my parents already know that I'm gay. I've reconnected with them. You know, there's the beginnings of some reparation there between my mum and my dad and myself. And then the marriage equality vote comes up.
Okay.
And I remember talking to my dad about this and saying to him, Dad, this is not about whether or not I'm allowed to get married. This is about if I have a car accident and my partner is the only person in the vicinity, is he allowed to come and visit me in hospital when I'm dying?
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to put it in those terms for him to get it. And he's like, it's okay, son. I got it. Okay. I find out 2 or 3 years later, he got it all right. He voted no for himself. Okay. And he actually took my mum's ballot and voted no for her as well and didn't tell her that it arrived. She found out after the marriage equality vote happened and said, well, why didn't I get one?
Oh, man.
Because my dad filled it out for her.
I wonder if that's a crime, but still.
It is a crime. It is a crime.
I mean, I think mail theft is a federal crime.
So, you know, like there's a lot to talk about there. There's like probably the biggest thing that concerned me is I'm not a practicing Christian. I don't believe in God. I think if there was a God, like one of my heroes at the moment is Stephen Fry, and I love the things that he says about the existence of God. You know, like he was asked about whether or not there is a God, and if he dies and he goes to the pearly gates and God himself comes down and greets him, and what would Stephen Fry say? And Stephen Fry's response is bone cancer in children. Yeah. What's that all about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, so you know that concept is what I subscribe to.
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea of me being on my deathbed and having my parents having the right to overrule my partner when
Right.
it comes to the terms of my funeral disgusts me. The idea that that was even a thing up until a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The fact that my parents could have forced a religious funeral on my dead body and my partner would have had no say in it.
Okay.
That's why it was so important that marriage equality happened. Because it's not just marriage equality, it's equality as a human goddamn being.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, to all those
Terrifying.
Christians and former Christians who listen to your podcast out there, you know, the one thing that I really want to impress on you is that whether or not you believe that we are an abomination to God and whether or not we're the epitome of hell, you got to ask yourself, is God perfect? Tanya, is God perfect?
Well, say during the bushfires, the koalas were screaming. So I have to say no. It's a no from me.
All right, Simon Cowell. But the thing is, though, like a lot of Christians believe that God is perfection. He is omnipotent, he's omniscient, he knows everything, is everywhere, is everything, yeah? So if God is perfect, does God make mistakes? Most Christians will answer with, no, he doesn't make mistakes. I'm like, okay, so why am I gay? Let me tell you something right now. And we were talking about this during Pride Month, and I was actually kind of tempted to come on and talk to you about this during Pride Month.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, with everything that I've gone through, my conversion therapy, being spat on, being abused, being told off, being told I'm going to hell, all the horrible things that I've been a part of, having to fight tooth and nail just to be accepted. Do you think anyone in their right mind, and believe me, I'm in my right mind, do you think anyone in their right mind would choose to be gay?
Yeah.
I'd be straight if I could choose. If it was a choice,
honey,
I would choose to be straight tomorrow.
Oh man, even still, after all this time.
Even still, if it was a choice, I would choose to be straight because I can then just slide straight back into humanity without anyone ever questioning my motives.
Man.
Because that's who we are as humans. We're constantly questioning each other. We're constantly looking for ways to take advantage of each other. And it's a very rare let me rephrase that. It's not humans who are like that, because some of the most incredible people that I've ever met, some of the most loving and caring and maternal and paternal people that I have ever met in my life would never dawn the freaking doorstep of a church.
Ain't that the truth? Luke?
Yes, my love.
We haven't done the when did you leave Hillsong? And
Can I be honest with you and say that I actually don't remember? I don't remember when, and I don't remember why. I just remember I had to get out of there.
Yeah. Okay. Why is that? I mean, what was the feeling like?
The feeling was, and this is a really fascinating feeling. The feeling was Bible college students getting their first opportunity to preach by doing the giving message.
Oh, Lord.
That's how important money was to Hillsong. You needed to prove that you could preach by preaching about how much we need your money.
All right.
First.
Okay. Brutal.
Yeah. And you only get to that point after you've done your service period. Now, while all of these wonderful, incredible people were going to Hillsong Conference, the poor schlubs who were working 18-hour days to pull that conference off were all your Bible college students who were paying for the pleasure of being slaves. One of the ways why I knew that Darren Kiddo had it in for me was I was on the security detail.
Mm-hmm.
And there were very strict instructions. You are not a person. Like, don't get me wrong, they never said this. They never said that you're not a person. But they certainly made you feel like you weren't a person, because you are not there to talk to anybody for any reason except your direct supervisor. You do not engage with the special guests.
Yeah.
If they say hello to you, you are to say hello back very quietly and then let them move on. Now, I love music. And at that point in time, Delirious were they were the band of the moment, yeah? Someone out there is going to crank up the Google machine and find out what year it was that Delirious were at Hillsong Conference. That was the year I was on security detail in the green room. And I was so excited that Delirious walked in that I actually said hi. I was removed from there within
Oh, wow.
5 minutes,
Wow.
and I was put on security detail of an elevator that nobody used in the back halls of the bowels of the bloody Superdome.
If that isn't Scientology style, I don't know what. You've got a lot to say. I hope.
Boy, do I.
No, and it's fantastic because you make me sound like, Tinkerbell, kind of sweet and very friendly. It's been fantastic talking to you, and we will keep going. Like, I hope that this doesn't kind of disturb you too much going back in the memory bank, especially when like you said, you've deliberately suppressed it. I always found that, it's like you go back and it's like putting your hand down the sink to try and get your ring because it fell down the sink. And then when you pull your hand back out, there's like all this stuff on your arm and all these extra memories and stuff. So promise me you'll take care of yourself after.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the only reason why I'm talking about it now is because I'm comfortable in the person that I am now.
Yeah.
And I've got a good support network around me. The next time we have a chat, there are some darker stories from my actual childhood, from kinder year 4, and that sort of stuff is some really deep, dark, horrible shit that went down. And I've got a really good support network, and I've shared some of that story most of that story actually with one person in particular who has just been a massive support to me, and someone who just completely changed my life. Basically, my adopted parents now live in Melbourne, and when I came down here, I was parentless because I'd cut my parents off. I moved down here out of rebellion after leaving the church and embracing my homosexuality. And I remember in the early 2000s bringing a boyfriend to Christmas lunch, which wasn't very well received. It was even less well received because he was a goth. So, but when I moved down to Melbourne, I found my tribe down here. I found people who were interested in some things that I was interested in, some sci-fi and stuff like that, and fantasy and all that kind of stuff. And, there was an elderly couple who really kind of became mum and dad to me. And they've been such a strong emotional support for me. And in some ways, they were the parents that my parents were never allowed to be. And, there is a bit of bitterness from me towards my parents, and we'll go into that at a later date. But I also realized that my parents were suffering from the same need to be accepted by their God that I was. Yes. So it's really hard for me to remain bitter towards my parents. In fact, if anything, I pity them. I empathize with them, but I pity them because, they're in their 50s and 60s now, and they've never achieved the things that they felt God had for them. I refuse to be that person. I refuse to be anything like that, which is why I now live a perfectly atheist life. I have absolutely, don't even for a single second in my life have to stop and consider, I wonder if there is a God. Should I try and cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye just in case I do die and I go to hell? Man, I've been to hell. I live in heaven now.
Aww.
Hell was when I was 10, 12, 15, 20, 23.
Yeah.
I'm 40 now, and I'm the happiest I've ever been.
Yay. I'm so happy to hear that. That's so wonderful. Let's end on that wonderful, wonderful note. Thank you, Luke. We'll talk soon.
Pleasure. Yeah? Look, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed delving into a bit of my backstory and sharing a bit of my story with you. And look, Tanya, I want to give you a huge shout out as well, because I reached out to you months ago, and I think one of the first things I said to you was that listening to the people that you've had on your podcast 6 or so months ago when I first started listening really made me realize that I'm not broken. I sent you a message a few months ago, which I think you actually read out on air. But the biggest, and I'll say it again now, the biggest lie that the Hillsong Church and any of these Pentecostal church will tell you is that aside from God, you're alone. And you and what you've done and the people who you've had on your podcast have reminded me that I'm not.
No.
So thank you for that.
Oh, look, thank you. That's the hope of the whole thing. And that's where I started thinking there's got to be somebody else out there somewhere. So I'm so glad you found us, and I'm so glad you've become one of those stories that people can listen to and find hope in. Thank you so much. Thanks, Luke. Talk soon.
Anytime.
Yeah, sweet. Bye.
Bye.
Isn't he great? And he'll be back because he's actually got those were the warm-up stories. Those were the things that Luke was able to discuss on our first meeting. So you can tell now there's so many more people coming forward, and really would invite the leaders, the pastors, the men of power, the women of power, the women who benefit from the power. Really invite you to come and have a chat with us on Leaving Hillsong and just hand yourselves in, because it looks like if you don't tell your version of events of what happened at the church where you stood up and asked people for money in the name of God and told them what to do, if you don't tell your version of events, somebody's going to tell their version of events of what happened around you. And it's so unpredictable when people put two and two and a tithe together and realize that, they got robbed. It's so very different when different people come forward. So, we need some kind of truth and reconciliation committee like they had in South Africa, or something, some kind of amnesty, because there's so much damage. But, the stories will come out. It is going to all be dragged on out into the sunlight one way or another. So best you boys repent and turn away and come and have a chat with us, because things are getting more serious. Have a fantastic week. There's so much content coming up, lots of different and exciting and interesting stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our little show. And I hope you got something out of it that you can use to be kind to yourself, to be kind to other people, or for keeping on Leaving Hillsong. We'll talk soon. Bye.